So we bought our first shop tool. It's the Dewalt 779 compound bevel miter saw. Now, you may have seen in our last video we set up these sawhorses in this job site table with the C700 from Tough Build. We need to get that done before we could put this together because we actually needed a surface to put it on. So today I'm going to unbox this, we're going to take it apart, we're going to take a look at everything that's inside, and then I'm going to put it through some minor things that I have to do around the house. So I'll record it, we'll kind of test it that way. The reason that we chose this as our first power tool or first shop tool or major power tool is I looked around a lot of stuff. I was like, table saw, should I get a miter saw, what do I need to make the most cuts? And since we have a lot of projects that involve small cross cuts, including we're going to put some flooring down in the baby's room, we need to fix some molding, I need to do some transitional stuff between flooring. We figured this would be the best tool to kind of start our collection of large shop tools with. So with that said, I am going to open the box. Okay, we're back after a short break. I had actually stopped to read the directions overnight, and now we're back, and it's the next day and looking back at the saw. So when I was taking it out of the box, it was fairly simple to get out. The saw comes fully assembled. If you look up here on the top, there is a carrying handle. I was using this to lift out of the box, so it was actually much easier to get out than it looked. It kind of got hung up in the foam, which made it look heavy, but it really wasn't all that heavy. Another thing that I had a little trouble finding was there is a little locking pin on the side of this saw, and I'll show you a close-up of that right now. This little locking pin, you have to push down slightly on the top handle of the saw and pull the pin out. That then allows the saw to move. If you then need to transport the saw at a later date, you push the pin back in. Well, first you push the saw back down, then you push the pin back in and it locks it back into place. So the first thing I wanted to test is I want to change the blade. The blade I had is a general purpose, it's a 32 tooth blade, but I want to do some more fine finish work, so I'm going to change this out for a 12-inch 80 tooth blade by Diablo, and this is for fine finish work. So once you have the wrench that comes with the saw, all you need to do to change the blade is start by loosening this screw right here. You don't need to take it out, just loosen it a little bit. So the second step is to pull the blade guard back and loosen this screw over here. So it can be a little difficult, but what you want to do is you want to unloosen the screw while holding the guard back so that it passes this little ridge on the secondary guard. Once this moves up, you can see it now gives you access to the screw to remove the blade. Make sure that the saw is not plugged in. Safety first on this. With the blade guard retracted back and the secondary guard over here moved back, you can now access the screw that retains the blade on the saw. This is reverse threaded, so it's going to be right to loosen. So before you start to loosen the blade, you need to engage the lock on the other side. So you push this button down and you turn the blade until it grips. Once it grips, you can put the wrench on the saw and then turn in the reverse direction until it loosens, and then you can remove it by hand. So first you want to remove the cover nut, and then you want to carefully remove the saw blade. Now you want to do this especially carefully because you don't want to scratch or bang any of the blade tips, which could ruin the blade on you. Now with the blade removed, there is a little spacer. Now this little spacer can be used for 1-inch versus 5/8 blades. You either take it on or off depending on what kind of blade you have. My replacement blade is the same hole size as the blade I'm replacing. So in this case, I can just insert the new blade. So I want to do this again very carefully, not to ding the blades. Once I have it in place over the retainer, I want to get the top screw. And just start by hand tightening it into place. Again, remember, this is reverse threaded, so the opposite direction. It's going to be left to tighten. Another important thing to do is make sure you have the blade direction correctly. So here you can see the arrow facing this way and the arrow on the blade match. Now with the blade hand tightened, we're going to hit the engage button on the back, make sure the blade locks again. With the blade locked, we'll put the screw and just give it a little turn with the wrench to make sure it's snug and tight. Now we can pull back down the retainer, and you want to make sure you hold this in place. You can do that just by putting a little pressure on the back of the blade guard, and then tighten this back up. Now I got the blade guard down and retighten the first screw. With that, the blade is replaced and we're ready to do some test cuts. So now that I have the saw all set up, it's time to go upstairs. Each member of the family has a different project they'd like to work on that requires something like this to get finished. So let's go take a look.
So for my project, I'll be working on the molding around the closets, which requires a miter cut. We're going to add an insert of wood here to cover the rail and then cover with the molding. So we have a 1/8 review around the whole closet door.
My project was to fix some damaged subfloor. In order to do that, I had to cut out the bad piece of plywood and then replace it with a new piece. So now that we know what we're up against, it's time to head back downstairs and finish all those cuts. So before I start cutting, I want to make sure I check the square on the saw. The saw is brand new, so there's no guarantee that everything's perfectly square and perpendicular so the cuts are straight. One interesting device to do this is I have this Vixie, and this is a digital angle meter. So the way this works is I turn it on and then put it on top of the saw and hit the 0 button. This will make the angle 0. Now I can lower the saw, take it, turn it sideways, clamp it on, and if everything's perfect, it should give me a 90-degree reading, which it does. The saw is perfectly true. Take this back off. The next thing I want to check is whether the miter is set. So the miters I'm going to cut today are 45-degree angles. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the miter saw, move it over to the 45-degree mark where it snaps into place. I have my trusty speed square here. I'm going to lay this up against the edge of the fence, and then I'll bring the blade down, and then I'll just see if it goes square against the fence and square against the blade. In this case, it does both, which means this is a perfect 45. I'm going to move everything back to the 90-degree mark, and now I'm going to quickly plug the saw back in and we'll start making some cuts. So I'm now ready to make my first cut. I'm going to start by putting on safety gear. I'll put on my hearing protection. Sorry if I start to sound weird if I can't hear myself speak. I'm also going to put on safety glasses. So the first test we're going to do is on hardwood. The piece I have right here is a transition from the hardwood to the carpet. We're going to start by making a cut on this. So the piece I need is exactly 32 inches, but before I cut the 32 inches, I want to make sure that the edge is square. So I'm going to put this up against the fence and clamp it down to hold it in place. And now I'm ready to make my first cut. So to do that, I'm going to start by depressing the button and then wait till the saw gets to full speed, then slowly descend through the piece of wood and then back up again. Another nice feature of this saw is it does have an auto braking system, so as soon as I let go of the trigger, it automatically starts to stop the blade very quickly. So with that first cut, you can see it cut very smooth, very clean, right through the hardwood for a perfect first cut. Now I'm just going to go measure out the 32 inches. Carefully line the saw blade up with my 32 inch mark. I'm going to start the saw. And another clean cut through the wood. So now I'll just dry fit this, make sure everything's perfect. We'll stain it, put some semi-gloss coating over the top of it to make it look nice, and then we'll install it. So the cut looked great on that piece of hardwood. Now I'm going to try a piece of softer wood. This is the strip that we're going to use to hide underneath the molding for the closet to make the reveal look right. I'm going to start by just making a quick cut across the edge just to square it up. I have the piece of wood inserted into the saw. I'm going to lock this one down because it's kind of a small cut. Okay, now I'm going to measure off my length. Tighten this down. And this cut. Okay, so that last cut went well. So next thing up is we're going to cut that header piece of molding that we had. I'm reusing a piece of molding that I had taken down from a different spot, but it's the same as the rest that's used in the room. So I'm gonna start by cutting off a clean edge because I don't really know if this edge over here is very good. So I'll start by setting the miter saw to its 45-degree angle and lock it down. Again, I'm using the lock because there's not really a great place to safely grab over here. With the material held in place, I will make the cut. Again, so this is medium density fiberboard. As you can see, it's a good idea I made the cut because there was a crack on the edge, so I'll probably go back and cut it a little further over. It's also probably a good idea with the fiberboard to actually wear some, in addition to eye protection and hearing protection, to also wear a respirator. So the nice thing about the compound saw is now that I need to cut in the other direction, rather than having to flip the wood over, I can just easily push down the button and adjust it over to the 45 on the other side. Now with it adjusted, I can now set up my cut. And easily finish that header off. Now we just need to install it. The final set of cuts I need to make are these 2x4s. These 2x4s are to frame out that hole in the subfloor that needs to be replaced. So first up, I'm going to make a squaring cut so everything fits nice together. And now I'm just going to finish these up. Because of the way the saw works, I can also cut two 2x4s at the same time to make sure they are exactly the same size. Now that we have all the cuts done, let's go upstairs, install this stuff, and see how well the saw did. Okay, for this floor transition project, I've already cut away some of the carpeting over here. So I'm going to start by stapling that back down with 1/2-inch staples. The reason I removed some carpeting was just to make room for the wood to fit. Now I have the piece that we cut earlier of the hardwood. This has now been stained and covered with a semi-gloss to match the flooring that's already here. I'm just going to take this edge and match it up with the current wood flooring. Now I'm just going to take this and put a couple brads across in order to hold this in place. Because this is hardwood, the first nail didn't go all the way in, so I'll have to countersink that in a little bit, but I can turn up the pressure. There we go. Now, just to fix these mistakes, you can see here's the brad. I'm not sure how clear that shows up on camera. That didn't fire all the way through. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take these snips, snip away the extra metal, which leaves me just a tiny piece still hanging out. I can then use this set and push it back into the wood. Now all I need to do is get some wood filler and I can cover that little ding, but now it's flush to the floor again.
So as you can see, we have the wood trim up and installed. However, very common even with a good cut is house expansion and contraction causing a break here. So we're going to use a trim sealant to fill this in, paint, and then we'll be done. The sealant that we're using today is DAP Crown Molding, Premium Molding, and Trim Sealant. So now I'm going to use the sealant with my finger to fill in the gap. So with the crack nail filled in, we just have to go over with a paper towel so there's no excess spillover. And here's my completed project.
To finish my project up, I needed to cut some 2x4s in order to frame out the hole where the old subfloor was removed. This is what it looks like when it was all finished. I'll call this project done. We've now finished every project around the house that we had to do for the testing of this saw, and I can honestly say it performed pretty flawlessly. I don't know how we could have gotten the projects done without the use of it. The Dewalt, in combination with this Diablo blade, made really precision cuts. They were really perfect, required no sanding. Everything fit together perfectly smooth. But that said, we didn't even really touch what the saw is capable. It can do things like bevel cuts. It has the ability of setting a stop so that the saw can only go down a certain distance. This might be great if we decide to do some timber framing type stuff and we just want to cut partially into the wood and then chisel it out. The nice thing about buying something like this is even though it was more than we need now, we can grow into it. And I fully expect to be a lot more projects in this house to work on. So with that, I guess the only thing I could say is that I'd have a few suggestions. I mean, I have no complaints on this saw whatsoever, but there's a couple things that I would have liked to see differently. So my first suggestion is the dust collector. The intake over here probably could have been a little bit bigger. That would have been nice because it collected a lot of sawdust, but not a ton. So I would say it was adequate to keep the dust level down, but it could have been a little bit better. But maybe I can do a little experiment and see if I can get the shop vac hooked up to it, and maybe if it performs a little better. Like I said, we're gonna have more projects, so that'll be something to try at a later time. The next thing is, and this is probably me being a new dad, is I would have liked to see some kind of lockout device. Oh, just found it. So there actually is, I was about to complain about this, but I will give props. There is actually a hole in the button where I can drop a padlock through. The nice thing about this is this prevents this button, even when the saw is plugged in, from being pressed. So it allows me to safely store this saw and know that the baby or some small hands are not going to get into this. So yeah, great product, really like working with it. It's nice, stable, which makes it feel very safe and durable. I highly recommend it, and we'll see how it holds up as we go on to more and more projects. That concludes our unboxing of the Dewalt 779 dual bevel compound miter saw. It did everything we needed it to do, and it did a whole bunch more. It was a great product, and we really look forward to using it in the future. If you like this video and found any of this information interesting or useful, please subscribe below. Please leave us a comment on what we can do better or what you liked about the video, and we hope to see you again soon.